There's one very under talked about component to what is happening right now in Palestine that I think is really, really important that people start paying attention to and maybe even messaging around. And that is the fact that what Israel is doing is it is drawing the United States, one of the world's superpowers, into what will be a like international war. There is no such thing as an actual regionally locked conflict around Israel. That is not even possible. If Israel continues to push the buttons of Hezbollah, it will draw Iran into the conflict further. This will happen. Iran is already primed and ready, both internally, politically, as well as just externally in how they are messaging to the world, to strike Israel harder and harder every single time that Israel kind of twists the knife. And there will come a point, there will be a point that Israel twists the knife enough that Iran just says fuck it, and they just fully enter. And the moment that happens, based off of how we've already seen I guess potential president-elect Kamala Harris say this, the United States will always guarantee Israel's right to defend itself and to secure itself, which means that we will always be there. We will always be there with the carrier strike groups. And the moment the United States and Iran are engaged in hot conflict, Russia will enter. Or you may not think so, because you think, oh, Russia's tied up in Ukraine. I promise you that they're not going to miss that fight. Promise you that. And even if Russia tried not to enter, we would see little green men, almost certainly. Almost certainly, we would see Russian soldiers on the ground, diverted from Syria. They would come in. And the moment that happens, this is where international conflict spills over and over and over. And if anything, even if you don't care about the history of the ethnogenocide that is happening, even if you don't particularly care about the history of Zionism and its settler colonial backing, even if you care about none of that, you should care about the fact that a single political party in a country that you likely have never been to is single-handedly drawing your country, if you live in the United States, into a war that absolutely, if it starts, will spiral into World War III. For the price of, and I want to make sure we're very clear about this, nothing. Gaza is so destroyed at this point that it's estimated it would take a decade to rebuild it. There's nothing there for Israel at all. This is a pit of hell, quite literally. You know what I mean? Israel has completely eviscerated all of its international goodwill at this point. There's no future for the Israeli state in its current position. And that's why I believe that very seriously, this is a suicide pact that is happening. Benjamin Netanyahu knows there is no future for him. There's no coming back from this. There's no reintroducing yourself, reingratiating yourself into the global power structure at this point. The United States also is in a horrific position right now because it has completely shown its ass in a way that it has not been so mask off in its own malevolence in a very long time. To have used our veto power to literally tell the rest of the world you're not going to vote on Palestine being a state last spring, that was a fucking nail in the coffin if I've ever seen one. And the continued doubling and tripling down as, keep in mind, the countries who we depend on in NATO, they also have their own popularity problems internally. You look at Schultz's approval ratings. You look at Macron's approval ratings. Not even counting the fact that he's literally trying to keep a leftist from becoming prime minister, even though that's technically something that should be happening right now. Look at any of these other big countries we depend on in NATO to just secure our own alliances in the Eastern Hemisphere. They're all fucking, toppling because all of these leaders all over the globe that are allied to the United States are doing things in the face of what their populace wants. So, beyond the political implications here in the United States, just for domestic popularity, this is a quagmire of a quagmire, and it is being done for nothing. And I really, really hope that the pro-Palestine movement grapples with this and begins to really wring the neck of this point. Because I actually think that is the key to getting more people to pay attention to this movement. I think the history of what's going on in the Middle East is very important. And I think the history of how it is that Zionism really put its tendrils inside of Palestine and just completely excised, any sense out of that region. Because enough Zionists just wanted the land and whatnot. I think that's horrific, and it's a history that needs to be elevated, certainly. But in terms of making people understand the gravity of what's really happening here, from a realist perspective, from a power-based perspective, it is laughably bad. There are so many miscalculations that are happening all at once that have the potential to, and I mean this with no sense of hyperbole, literally end all of this shit. For nothing.